Hello Year 9, Mrs Blackbend here. Our learning objective today is to explain what we can infer when the sergeant says, "Unseamed him from the nave to the chops." So we're going to revise the meaning of this quotation, its significance, and its various interpretations today. Our key vocabulary today are the nouns honour, meaning doing what you believe to be right and being confident that you've done what is right, and legacy, meaning an event or a period of time which is a direct result of another and which continues to exist after it's over. Other versatile vocabulary which might be useful are normal and abnormal, predator and prey, volatile and constant, vulnerable and secure. Firstly, we need to record our quotation, and it needs to be in some space so that we can make our notes around it. I would recommend putting your piece of paper horizontally and writing your quotation in the middle. Our quotation is "Unseamed him from the nave to the chops." If you have highlighters or a ruler, our three words and phrases for discussion are the verb unseamed, the pronoun him, and the symbolic phrase the nave to the chops. We're going to write notes on each of these. We need to make sure we're confident, first of all, on the location of this quotation and its meaning. Okay. So, this quotation comes from Act 1, Scene 2, at the beginning of the play, after the witches have met on the heath, to talk about Macbeth, and after the battle between Scotland and Norway has been fought. The speaker of this quotation is called the Sergeant, and he is part of the Scottish Army. He's talking to King Duncan about the events of the battle, and mentions in particular the actions of Macbeth. The officer describes how Macbeth has brutally executed the traitor MacDonald, and appears to convey his feelings of both admiration and horror, since Macbeth appears both heroic but also sadistic in this quotation. A sadistic person is someone who gains pleasure from hurting others. Pause here and make sure you have these notes completed. Okay, so we're going to work through this quotation chronologically, and we're going to look at each key phrase or key word in detail. So, the first thing we're going to focus on is the verb unseamed, meaning to take apart. Think about a seam on an item of clothing that joins two pieces of material together. This verb means that Macbeth literally cuts this man in two. You might find it helpful to draw yourself a little image to present this action to remind yourself of what's being done. So what does this action reveal to us about our protagonist? Well, on the one hand, it seems to prove his honour. He's loyal and he's brave to his king. He's valorous. This violent image also suggests that he has a brute strength and a brutality, but these are qualities that would have been admired as a Jacobean soldier, lord and man. It also makes Macbeth seem abnormal amongst other men, who are vulnerable to his volatile, predatory capabilities. He can do gory and unspeakable things in the name of the king. Pause now and make sure you have these notes for the verb unseamed complete. Secondly, we're going to think about the pronoun him. This is referring to the traitor MacDonald, who helped Norway enter Scotland before the battle. It's a third-person pronoun, which is a rude way to refer to someone, actually, if you haven't used their name already. The sergeant will not speak the traitor's name, and this is due to his treachery. The sergeant is ashamed that such a figure in the Scottish hierarchy would undertake such an act. Remember, MacDonald used to be the Thane of Cawdor. It dehumanises the traitor, which is his punishment for such acts. He's now seen to be lesser to other men, and he's in a vulnerable position. The legacy of his name is being destroyed as a punishment for his actions against the crown. Pause now and make sure these notes on the third person pronoun him are complete. Our final part of this quotation is perhaps the most important, and it certainly has a number of interpretations about it. The phrase, knave to the chops, literally means that in this quotation, Macbeth has split the traitor open from his nave, his belly button, to his chops, his mouth. This would have spilled out his insides onto the battlefield. You might find it helpful to draw yourself a little image to present this idea of the traitor's death. This would have been a gruesome, painful death, punishment for MacDonald's treachery, and it demonstrates Macbeth's honour to his king. The insides of the traitor are exposed, like his sins against the king. He's been disembowelled, which is the name for this type of death, and it shows Macbeth's predatory desire to mutilate and obliterate all those who would threaten the security of Duncan's kingdom. As such, it can be seen as a warning to others who might be tempted to be as treacherous as MacDonald was. Macbeth dehumanises the traitor, just like we talked about with the personal pronoun. They want to make sure that those who see the traitor and learn of his actions understand that this kind of behaviour will not be tolerated by the King of Scotland. The second interpretation of this phrase reveals Macbeth's lack of control, or his volatile nature. This is in play from the very beginning of the text. Although we could argue that the witches manipulate Macbeth's vulnerability in his ambition, perhaps we do see here in this quotation that Macbeth is already curious about what it takes to betray the normal hierarchy for personal gain. Does he see himself in the traitor, MacDonald? It's almost like he needs to see inside the body of the traitor, literally, to identify which part of the man changes when he becomes treacherous. The last thing about this phrase within the quotation is its structural significance. This is a line from the second scene of the play. At the end of the play, Macbeth is also beheaded. This is a cyclical structure, meaning that the play begins and ends in a similar way, as it has both traitors dying violent, gruesome deaths. Perhaps this reveals that Macbeth's downfall is inevitable, or perhaps it shows that Shakespeare's attitude to traitors is that they should be punished severely for treachery. There are lots of links to the context of the play that could be made in relation to this quotation. You could talk about how the Crown treated their prisoners for crimes such as treachery. You could talk about the process of criminals being hung, drawn and quartered during this period of history. You could talk about the gunpowder plot, which just before the play was first created, the King of England and Scotland, James I, had dealt with. And lastly, you could talk about the divine right of kings. Whilst Macbeth has dealt or delivered serious punishment onto such characters as Banquo and Macbeth during the play, his own flawed view of treachery coming into play, believing such characters to be doing him wrong and harming his legacy on the throne, he suffers his own gruesome, violent death, just like the one we see here. And this is for daring to manipulate fate in order to feed his own ambition. Pause now if you need to ensure that all your notes are completed for this quotation. You're then going to return to your lesson for your next instruction and use these notes to demonstrate your learning about the quotation, unseamed him from the nave to the chops.